Yo guys, it's Slyroh. You already know that today I am doing a massive undertaking as I'm going to be ranking every single boss in Bloodborne. Every single one. I have actually not seen anybody else do this, which is crazy. I know it sounds like I'm making that up because people do Bloodborne boss rankings all the time, but I haven't seen anybody rank every single boss, including all of the Chalice Dungeon bosses, which is what I'm going to be doing today. The reason I'm talking so fast is because we have 53 of these suckers to get through. Because, like I said, it's going to be every single one, and you'll see what I mean as we get through the list. Every boss from base game, every boss from DLC, every boss of the shared fixed Chalice Dungeons, one on every layer, and that is what brings me to the total of 53 bosses. This list is heavily taking into account my most recent experience, because I just finished a playthrough of the game on my channel, but I have fought all these bosses more than one time, so let's go ahead and get into it. These are all 53 Bloodborne bosses ranked from my least favorite to my favorite. Let me re-emphasize, least favorite to favorite. Not easiest to hardest, which is something that a lot of people do. I don't really care about that. When you do a list like that, everybody's list almost looks the same anyway, so we're going to do it from my least favorite to favorite because that will actually make a different list. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe because I would like to do more videos of this type, but it does take a lot of effort to put together. Enough stalling, let's go ahead and jump into the list. At number 53, the worst boss in the entirety of Bloodborne is the amygdala of the Defiled Chalice Dungeon. I actually like the amygdala fight a good bit, however, it doesn't really work when you're inside of a closed room, especially when it rips off its arms and, there's not a lot of places to move out of the way. Combine that with the less health that you get from being in the Defiled Chalice Dungeon, and it's a recipe for disaster. Even when the fight does go well, it just takes such a long time because there's a tedious balance between getting your hits in and not getting a hit, and it just takes forever. I don't really like this fight at all. At number 52 is Lawrence, the first Vicar. Does that sound weird to anybody else? Vicar? That doesn't even sound like a real word. Either way, I don't really like this fight, mostly because I'm really bad at dodging the attacks. All of his slams and arm stuff always have these after effects that get me every single time. The swipes do so much damage. It feels like it should be so much easier because it's just the Cleric Beast but on fire, and the Cleric Beast is a very easy fight, but I always struggle with this one. I always just have to hope for the best and just try to get to the second phase as fast as possible, because once I get to the second phase, I actually quite like the fight. Having him crawl around on the ground is pretty funny, and it's actually a little terrifying, but I do enjoy that part, but getting to that part is rough, and then usually once it gets to the second phase, I usually win first try, so I don't get to experience it all that much. And that just speaks to the quality of Bloodborne bosses that I already have good things to say when we're only at number 52. Coming in at number 51 is the abhorrent beast of the Ailing Loran Chalice Dungeon. The Ailing Loran Chalice Dungeon is definitely my least favorite of all the Chalice Dungeons, and something about the timing of when I got to this boss was really, really rough for me. I could not deal with the delayed attacks that this guy has, and so many of his hits just do so much damage. The design is sick, and maybe if I could get the attacks down, or maybe if I was higher leveled or something, maybe I would have had a better time with this, but I really did not enjoy my time with the first encounter with the abhorrent beast. The second one was a little bit better, and is not actually the next one on this list. What is next on this list, however, is the Brainsucker of the Lower Hintertomb Chalice Dungeon. I already don't really like encountering Brainsuckers as it is, and having one be a boss fight is just not that much fun. It's pretty easy, but also has more health than you'd think, and so it can be pretty bad if you get caught in a bad sequence of events, which didn't happen to me, but the chance is still there. Which is why number 49 is the Brainsucker of the Is Chalice Dungeon. It's the same thing with a lot of health, except for there's more pillars to hide behind, which makes it just a little bit better. At number 48 is the Temerian descendant of the Tumeru Ihil Chalice Dungeon, which is the final Chalice Dungeon that I did, and this guy wrecked me. So the sequence of 5 or 6 hits in a row was super rough. I had a good chunk of health, did a lot of damage, and I just could not find good windows to attack. And this isn't the only time you fight the Temerian descendant, but it's the only one that I feel like I struggled against in a not very fun way. There's one attack where the windup is so fast that you have no time to react. Like I said, he's got a combo of 6 hits that if you get caught in one, you're just done for. And if you just watched me fight, you would understand it was just not a good time for me, and that is what is going to land it at number 48 on the list. Number 47 is the Loran Silver Beast of the Lower Loran Chalice Dungeons. This is just a normal enemy with a boss health bar. I think you even fight one of these earlier in the lair of that Chalice Dungeon, and you also fight in this really big arena, despite the fact that it doesn't get used at all by any of the boss's attacks or patterns or anything. It's just kind of there, and also incredibly easy. Speaking of normal enemies with a boss health bar, at number 46 is going to be the Man-Eater Boar of the Hintertomb Chalice Dungeon. By the time you reach the Hintertomb Chalice Dungeon, you've probably already fought one of these things, and on repeat playthroughs, you've definitely already fought these things, and you already know how to beat them. So this boss fight doesn't really offer anything new or unique. It is kind of cool to see the pig get a full boss health bar, but it is incredibly easy, and this version doesn't really offer anything that the normal enemy doesn't. At number 45, I'm putting the Living Failures. The boss arena is really cool, but the enemies just have so much health, it takes forever. And don't underestimate how much damage they do to you, because they will mess you up. And then you have to come to terms with the fact that you lost against a boss that is literally called Living Failure. I already know that's what I am, I don't need you to drive that point home further. But at least once you win, you then have access to the shortest boss run in the entire game as you go towards Lady Maria. So maybe they're not a complete failure. What is a complete failure is my ability to navigate Mikolash, Host of the Nightmares boss arena. His taunting is really fun and funny as he's like running away from you, but trying to remember the pattern to get him into the rooms and then fighting them there, it always escapes me how you're supposed to do it, and I struggle every single time. That's not the type of difficulty that I look for when I play these games, and that's not even mentioning the fact that you can corner him into a room and then have him hit you with a call beyond, because good luck trying to dodge that, and then just, you know, your health just draining. So I'm glad he's in the game, but I also don't really enjoy fighting him all that much. At number 43 is where the other abhorrent beast is going to land, the one of the Lower Loran Chalice Dungeon. He upgraded from a circular boss arena to a rectangular one, and I think the shape, as well as you being stronger by the time that you reach him in the Lower Loran Chalice Dungeon, really helps to make this fight a little bit better. I didn't have nearly as much of a problem with the bad hitboxes. I think was just taking less damage, so I could heal that back. And I just had more of a fun time trying to find the opening windows to attack. And that is why it is not next to the other one, because I do think that there are some slight improvements that make it better. Still not one of the best bosses in the game, I still don't think it's fantastic, but this is better than the first one. At number 42 is the Witch of Hemwick, which is generally agreed upon as being like the easiest boss of the game, which just makes it that much more upsetting when you do end up losing, because it happens. Don't underestimate the fact that they cast that like magic spell that will keep you in place from across the room, and they can get you with it when you're not paying attention. Does it happen often? No, but it can. So there's that. I do like the sort of setup. I like the sort of disappearing and you have to go around finding the witches, and the twist that there's even more than one witch in the first place. But at the same time, it can be kind of annoying if you're going around the boss room and just can't quite find them. And when you do find them, I mean, they go down pretty easily, so it's not a bad boss fight by any means. At number 41 is the Undead Giant of the Hintertomb Chalice Dungeon specifically, and I put this one as the lowest Undead Giant fight because I always forget that this exists. And I think the reason for that is that it doesn't really have anything special about it. It's pretty easy, and I've never really had a hard time with it. And so there's nothing about it that makes a lasting impact in my memory. And the Undead Giant gets improved upon in a later fight, so that really just leaves this one as just kind of being here. And while we're on the topic of the Undead Giant, number 40 is actually the first Undead Giant that you find in the first Temerian Chalice Dungeon. And this one is here just because it's kind of hard to find a good difficulty balance for me. If I go in right away, the Undead Giant is kind of actually difficult. You're in a small circular room. He can jump from across the room and kick you in the face, which like can almost one-shot you sometimes. So it can be a little rough, but if you go level up a couple times, come back, you can like beat him in like 4 hits, and it's like a pushover. So I always have a hard time trying to find a good difficulty balance with him. And I don't really like the small boss room compared to the attack that he has. So that is why the first Undead Giant is here. I've already mentioned that the Undead Giant is improved in a later fight, so we'll be taking a break from the Undead Giant, but we'll be back much, much later. Coming in at 39 is the Merciless Watcher of the first Temerian Chalice Dungeon. This is the group of 3 big guys that come after you. They don't have a lot of health. They will do a decent chunk of damage, but they are pretty easy to parry, and you have the multiple different levels to use, and it's a solid fight. And number 38 is going to be the Merciless Watcher of the Lower Temerian Chalice Dungeon, where it's a similar thing, but I believe that the arena is flat. There's a lot more pillars to take advantage of, so it's easier to sort of get them in the 1v1 matchups that you do want. And yeah, I have no problem with these guys. They are a good fight, but they are pretty easy, and they're just there in your way to get to better Chalice Dungeon bosses. At number 37 is the Bloodletting Beast of the Lower Temerian Chalice Dungeon. I really had a hard time figuring out this guy's attacks, and he will do a ton of damage to you. But I did figure it out eventually, but there was still like 1 or 2 attacks that I was not a big fan of, but I still just sort of made it work anyway. And at number 36 is the Bloodletting Beast of the Tumeru Ihil Chalice Dungeon, because I didn't die during this fight, and it was, you know, pretty difficult, but it was not nearly as bad. And I think this one specifically is the one that has this sort of transformation where like his head becomes like a little bit more like a worm or something, and switches up the attacks. And the shape of the room is a little bit different. And I think I like the rectangular boss arena room more than some of the circular ones. So that is why the Bloodletting Beast of the Tomb Khmeru Ihia Chalice dungeon is above the other one. But it's still only 36 because it still has some of the attacks that I don't super like, and it just doesn't stay in my mind as well as some of the other bosses in this game. At number 35 would be my pick for the easiest boss in the game, and that is the Celestial Emissary. By the time that you're strong enough to be going into Upper Cathedral Ward, and that you're strong enough to get through that and ready to take on Evereadus, Celestial Emissary is a complete pushover. It is a joke. That being said, I do like the little alien dudes. They are really fun to fight against. I like the sort of gimmick that they're protecting the leader. You hit the leader and then, it transforms into the giant one. And I have gotten hit by some pretty strong attacks by it before. It is possible to lose this fight, but, most of the time you won't. But I do like the boss arena, and I like the little alien dude, so that is why it ends up here. And then number 34 is also going to be the Celestial Emissary, but this one of the Is Chalice Dungeon, because this one doesn't have the little dudes. It just has a 1v1 fight with the big alien guy from full health to 0, and has more health, so you can get a good grasp as to what a full fight against the Celestial Emissary looks like, and it's still pretty fun. I enjoy it a lot, and that is why it lands here at number 34. At number 33 is The One Reborn. I love the intro cutscene of seeing this pile of flesh and bones and just grossness just fall from the sky out of, like, the moon. It's so gross, but I do really like it. I've always gone and taken out the Bell Ladies. I would not dream of fighting the One Reborn without taking them out first. And there's still some weird attacks that you can sort of get caught in, but at this point, I don't find this fight to be all that hard. I like the sort of big boss arena and, just dodging the attacks. I like the One Reborn. It's solid for where it is. It makes sense given the entirety of Yargle and everything that's there. It's just a really fun fight. I like it a lot. It just doesn't have anything else like super memorable, and we're starting to get to the part of the list where like I have only good things to say about all these bosses, which is crazy because we're not even halfway through the video. At number 32 is the Beast-Possessed Soul of the Central Temerian Chalice Dungeon. I really like this guy. He's very aggressive, and depending on how early on you get into the Central Temerian Chalice Dungeon, it can be pretty challenging. He is pretty easy to parry, but if you miss your parries and get hit, you actually will take a good chunk of damage. The boss arena is pretty small, but I think it works for an aggressive enemy like this, and I just have a really fun time fighting him. So much fun, in fact, that number 31 is the Beast-Possessed Soul of the Ailing Loran Chalice Dungeon. It's kind of the same fight with a larger boss arena, but he does have more health, so you just get to fight for even longer, which in this case is a good thing. At number 30 is the Moon Presence. I've always really liked the way that this one hops around and does its attacks, and just its design. It is just a little weird that if you're strong enough to be able to beat Gehrman, this is going to end up being a pretty disappointing fight because it's really not that hard. But at this point, it doesn't feel like I've completely beaten Bloodborne unless I go ahead and fight the Moon Presence. I don't do any of the other endings, so the fact that I go out of my way to make sure that I fight this boss every time I play through the game is a testament to how much fun I do find it, even if it is a little disappointing compared to Gehrman, who comes right before it. At number 29 is Murgo's Wet Nurse, a boss that I'm not even entirely sure if I've ever even lost to before. I just really think the design is cool. I love the swinging sword attacks. Visually, it's really cool when the boss, like, summons the darkness and, like, makes a clone and, is basically chasing you all around. I basically just run around in a circle and hope for the best. And, I don't know, I do find this fight to be a lot of fun. Usually at this point, by the time I get to it, I'm already pretty over-leveled, so it's a pretty easy fight, but it's one that I enjoy doing nonetheless. At number 28, it's the first boss in the game. It's the Cleric Beast. Now, I know technically this one's optional, so maybe your first boss was Father Gascoigne, but I always do the Cleric Beast first because I just really, really enjoy it. The introduction to the fight is always a lot of fun, the way that it just, like, jumps from out of nowhere and just lands in front of you, and it just really works as a good first test to these sort of big, beastly boss enemies, so I'll always sort of cherish it for that. Bloodborne was my first Souls-like game, and I was very, very bad at it, so the Cleric Beast really was the first time that I got stuck on a boss and just really had to rely on my own skill to overcome it. And it's crazy to look back at now because I think the Cleric Beast is one of the easier fights now, but I'll always sort of cherish that memory in my heart that this is the boss that really sort of started to sell Bloodborne for me, and it's still fun enough to do in repeat playthroughs even if it is easy now. At number 27 is going to be the Watchdog of the Old Lords from the first Temerian Chalice Dungeon. This is the final fight that you have to get through to claim victory over your first chalice dungeon, and it's a really fun fight. I like the design of the dog on fire. It is really cool, but, you know, it's just done a little bit better later on, which is kind of leaving this one to be a little bit more forgettable. But I do enjoy the fight. I think it's a pretty good test of your skill at that point in the game, assuming that you get to it a little bit early. And yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. It's just a solid fight. We're now in the upper half of the list, and starting at number 26 is the Bloodstarved Beast, specifically of the Hintertomb Chalice Dungeon. This one has a very open boss room, and I just feel like the Bloodstarved Beast boss fight works a little bit better when you can get more cornered up, because then you just have to be more aggressive, whereas this wide open space, the Bloodstarved Beast doesn't really take advantage of all the space. You don't really need to take advantage of all the space, but I do really enjoy fighting the Bloodstarved Beast, so it's nice to see it again, but it's just done better in other boss arenas. Speaking of being better in other boss arenas, at number 25 is Rom the Vacuous Spider of the Lower Temerian Chalice Dungeon. There's a lot of pillars in the way, though that's not going to stop Rom from, you know, shooting its attacks from the sky and hitting you. The pillars basically aren't actually there when it comes to Rom's attacks. Trying to deal with the spiders when there's a lot of other stuff in the way is not nearly as fun and rewarding as it is when you fight in the wide open lake area. So, I don't know. This one is fine because I do still really enjoy fighting Rom, but I think that it didn't really need to be here in this sort of crammed boss room. At number 24 is Yharnam the Temerian Queen. This is the last boss of the final Chalice Dungeon, at least in the way that I do Chalice Dungeons. And, you know, it's pretty cool. You've seen the Temerian Queen throughout the game, but this is your one time to actually fight her. She's got a lot of weird attacks, some of them that I don't even know how to get out of the way of, but usually by the time I get to her, I am such a high level that it's not too big of a threat. But it is fun. She has this big boss arena that she definitely takes use of. You have the multiple clones, and you need to find which one is real, so that way you can actually start doing damage to her. And yeah, it's just a solid fight. She's got a lot of interesting attacks, and it's really cool, and it is really nice to finally beat her and have that be the sort of final boss of all Chalice Dungeons. It's really nice, but I just like more other fights better, so I couldn't find any reason to move her even higher on this list. At number 23 is going to be the Bloodstarved Beast of the Ailing Loran Chalice Dungeon. I don't know if it's just when I went to the Ailing Loran Chalice Dungeon, but I feel like the enemies do a lot more damage, and that includes the Bloodstarved Beast as well. Though seeing it for the third time, it's kind of like, alright, can you pick a new boss, or are we just going to keep recycling old ones? That being said, I do still really like the fight. This one is in a little bit smaller of a room, where I even got caught up against the wall in some of its attacks, so I don't know, I just enjoy trying to fight Bloodstarved Beast in more smaller areas, and so this one is a little bit better than the last one, but not as good as the one in the base game, which we will get to later. At number 22 is Ebrietas, Daughter of the Cosmos of the Its Chalice Dungeon. The fight is basically the exact same as when you fight Ebrietas in the Upper Cathedral Ward, which is why number 21 is Ebrietas from the Upper Cathedral Ward, just because the boss arena is a lot better. I used to really struggle with Ebrietas, and I still do to an extent. It's definitely a fun challenge, but I like sort of baiting out the head slam to try and get hits on the head. I am better at dodging the sort of magic attacks, especially in like the second phase. It's a really fun challenge. I do like Ebrietas, but there are definitely some times where I still struggle, and I'm always kind of worried that I'm not going to be good enough to beat her, but I think it's a pretty good fight. I've definitely come around on it. If I would have made this list a couple years ago, I would have this at like the bottom of the list, so I've definitely come a long way in my fight with Ebrietas. Starting off the top 20 is the Loran Dark Beast of the Lower Loran Chalice Dungeon. This is kind of just a reskinned Dark Beast Parl with, I think some of the attacks might be a little bit different. Definitely feels pretty aggressive, and even though this is a nightmare for the camera because I always find not locking on to be the better way to fight, I do still really enjoy this fight. The boss arena is pretty big, so you have a chance to get away from the attacks, although even then sometimes it can be hard to find opportunities to heal, but I do still really like the fight, and it was nice seeing my good friend Dark Beast Parl after a long time of not seeing him. But yeah, speaking of which, number 19 is actually Dark Beast Parl, a fight which I really enjoy. It really rewards you for being aggressive and getting in there and trying to disrupt the lightning and then just go into town. Depending on your weapon, you'll have a better time. This is also a boss that you can fight pretty early on, or you can wait until you show up to Yargle proper, which I don't usually wait that long, because if you wait that long, then this boss is definitely a pushover. So I like finding a good difficulty balance, which I always find that I'm able to do with Dark Beast Parl, and I do think that it is a really fun fight. I just really enjoy trying to dodge the attacks, get her under him, hit the head, but then get out so I'm not trapped under and get hit by all the electricity. It's a good, delicate balance. It's a good dance with the Dark Beast. And, it is something that I really, really like going out of my way for to fight every single time I play this game. Coming in at number 18 is going to be Keeper of the Old Lords from the Central Temerian Chalice Dungeon. This is the first time that you fight the Keeper of the Old Lords, even though he does become a normal enemy in future Chalice Dungeons, as well as he is a boss one more time. I just really enjoy the fight. It's just, versus another human or human-shaped person. I don't really know Bloodborne lore all that well. The attacks are fun, it's rewarding to win, and there's just really no downsides to this fight, so that is what lands it here at number 18. At number 17 is the Temerian Descendant of the Central Temerian Chalice Dungeon. This one has a lot less health than the variant in the Temeru Ihil Chalice Dungeon, and the boss room is a lot bigger, giving you an opportunity to get out of the long combos. And generally I just find that he does slightly less damage, but still enough to be a threat. It's still a threat, but this is the ideal way to fight the Temerian Descendant. I actually really enjoy this fight, and I wish that if they were going to use this fight again, that they would have, used another large, open battle arena like they did with this one. At number 16 is the Temerian Elder of the Lower Hintertomb Chalice Dungeon. This is very similar to the Temerian Descendant fight, except for this guy uses like fire weapons, or uses like a staff that he uses as like a fire sword, a fire bow, and it just looks really cool. The arena is also big and open, giving you a chance to dodge around the attacks and not get caught up in any weird combos, although I don't think this guy has any like insane combos, but this is just a really fun fight and I enjoy it a lot. But it's very similar to the Temerian Descendant in the way that it looks visually and the boss arena, but it just has better attacks, so that is what lands it above it. Coming in at number 15 is the Forgotten Madman and the Madman's Escort. This is a boss that I forgot existed, but, his name is Forgotten Madman, so it makes sense as to why you would forget about him. But maybe I shouldn't, because this is just a fun hunter fight in the Lower Hintertomb Chalice Dungeon, and I just really have a good time with it. It's pretty tough, but it's fun to get him down to, like, that halfway point, and then I was so surprised that there was a second reinforcement, and then you just have to sort of figure out how to juggle between multiple enemies and try and get the first guy down so that way you can make it 2 1v1s instead of getting ganged up on. And I think that this game does a pretty good job of all of the boss fights where you have to juggle between multiple enemies, and this is no exception. At number 14 is Vicar Amelia. I absolutely love the intro cutscene and seeing her just like plunge the pendant or whatever and then start transforming into a beast is sick. I've always found the attacks to be pretty difficult to dodge. This is definitely like one of those bosses that is like, if you're like a first time player, this is the one that is going to hold you up. At least it was for me. I literally got stuck on this boss so much that even now I always do Hemwick Charnel Lane before even trying to fight Vicar Amelia, because I just assume that I'm going to get destroyed, which isn't really the case. But I don't know, the sounds, the design, the arena, I just really, really enjoy fighting Vicar Amelia, and I feel like I'm probably not alone in that. This is a really, really good boss fight. At number 13 is the Shadow of Yharnam, and I really, really enjoy this fight. The arena is sick, trying to juggle between the 3 different shadows. It's really, really hard to try and get the 1v1 that you want, and so I always end up doing like a little bit of damage to like all of them, even though it's definitely not advised to do it that way. I just find all 3 of them to be really fun. You gotta be looking out on all sides. You got the one that's shooting long range attacks at you, you got the ones that will come up close to you, and it is just a fun fight to sort of juggle. The only downside is sometimes in the final phase where they like summon the snakes out of the ground. I'm still really bad at dodging that attack. I don't even know a consistent way to dodge that attack, but I still really enjoy this fight. I always look forward to it when I get to the end of the Forbidden Woods, because that is an entire journey in and of itself, and beating the Shadow of Yharnam just feels like a really good, satisfying way to finish off that section of the game, and I just really, really enjoy it. Coming in at number 12 is the Keeper of the Old Lords of the Cursed Temerian Chalice Dungeon. This is just like the other Keeper of the Old Lords fight, except for you have less health because, Cursed Temerian Chalice Dungeon. I just really like this fight, and the fact that it's the same as before but a little bit harder just makes it more fun for me. It's fun to beat, it is still satisfying to win, even though that it is pretty easy. You can still get like 2-shot because that's what the Cursed Temerian Chalice Dungeon is like. But I just really like this fight, and that is what is going to land it this high on the list. Just missing out on the top 10, coming in at number 11 is going to be Gehrman. There is nothing quite like watching him get out of his chair to fight you as the final boss of the game, unless you're out here ingesting umbilical cords. The arena is fantastic. This was such a challenging fight on my first couple times through. It's less of a challenge if you are doing the chalice dungeons, and with the DLC, I do find it pretty easy to get myself over-leveled, and so the fight is not nearly as much of a challenge as it used to be, but still there's just something about the atmosphere and the fight that is just a lot of fun that I really enjoy, and it's just a really, really good end cap to a fantastic game. Kicking off the top 10, at number 10, is going to be Father Gascoigne. Very much just like Gearman, just on the opposite spectrum, where this is the first real hunter fight that you have, and yeah, this one is a doozy. I like the boss arena. I like the transformation into the beast in the second phase. There's just a lot of good things to it. It is a challenge. This is definitely going to be one of the first challenges for you as a newer player. And even on repeat playthroughs, I always feel like I lose once before I like go through, despite the fact that I almost feel like I shouldn't. I feel like I should be so good, but I'll get caught being just too aggressive or just making the wrong move, and you will get punished against Father Gascoigne. But yeah, the first big hunter boss of the game, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. I think it's a neat mechanic that you can even get the music box, even though I never really use it. I think it's neat that that is an option. And yeah, Father Gascoigne is fantastic for a reason. Everybody loves him, and there's a good reason why. Coming in at number 9, we are finally reaching the original Blood-Starved Beast. Making your way through Old Yharnam can absolutely feel like a chore, but you get the reward of fighting an incredible boss, walking into the church or whatever sort of building that the Blood-Starved Beast is in, and it looks like so small, so far away, and then as you like get closer, it just looks bigger and bigger, and then it stands up, and then it opens like it's flat. It's just like the introduction is 10 out of 10. Fantastic. I love fighting the Blood-Starved Beast. You really have to be aggressive, because you are inevitably going to get poisoned, and for me, I always just feel like it's a race between emptying its health bar before you die, and you have to juggle taking poison, not really being able to find that many good chances to heal, especially if you're trying to heal health and cure poison. It's just really rough. You have to be aggressive, and I just love that. I always find this fight to be really fun. The way that the Blood-Starved Beast moves feels very like unpredictable, even though like it kind of is, just like the way it sort of sways around and stuff like that. It's just so good. I love the presentation of this fight. I love beating it, and it's just really satisfying. It is one of the best early game bosses of any video game ever. I am a huge fan of the Blood-Starved Beast. Hey, remember when I started the video and I mentioned that I do like the amygdala fight, just not the one in the Defiled Chalice Dungeon? I kind of meant that, because coming in at number 8 is the amygdala of the Nightmare Frontier, which I gotta say, Nightmare Frontier might be my least favorite area of the entire game, but I will be damned if I don't do that area just to be able to fight the amygdala, because I love this fight so much. It is hard to explain why. I think I just really enjoy trying to find the open windows to attack. I love the big, large, open battlefield that you fight it on, and just the sort of attacks. I always fight from like a more long range, so that way it'll shoot us like eye lasers, it'll do like its sort of longer range attacks. I don't really like doing the strat of like going under the amygdala and doing it that way. That feels very inconsistent. I like just trying to find opportunities to hit the head, hit the arms, whatever. I don't feel like a lot of people like this boss, so I'm giving it the representation that it needs. I love the amygdala fight so much, and I make sure I do it every single time I play. And I wish that, if it was going to be reused in a Chalice Dungeon, that it would be in another big, wide open space. But unfortunately, the only good amygdala fight in this game is the one in the Nightmare Frontier, so I guess I will take that. At number 7 is going to be Martyr Ligarius, a boss that I probably would have said is my favorite boss at one point in time, but I just don't think that it gives me quite the same satisfaction as it used to. It's pretty easy for me now, and it's kind of really just dependent on whether you can parry him or not. There's still a lot of attacks that I'm not great at dodging, and, trying to find an attack window can sometimes take a long time. So, I don't know. I do really like this fight, even though I hate the boss run. Oh gosh, I hate the boss run of this fight so much. I think it's the worst one in the entire game. But being able to fight him on top of like the rooftops is just so good. I love the aesthetic, the presentation of it. It's just really good. So, I mean, I'm still a big fan of Martyr Ligarius. Even if it isn't my favorite anymore, it's still up there as one of the best in the game for sure. Just missing out of the top 5, coming in at number 6 is going to be Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower. This is a fan favorite for a reason. I think this is the pinnacle of hunter fights in this game. She is aggressive, she will punish you if you make mistakes, but she is just a lot of fun to fight. I actually found her to be pretty easy on my most recent attempt. I found that she didn't really take that much damage, and I was able to sort of maneuver around her attacks. I don't know if that was just a lucky run, or if I'm just better at the game than I give myself credit for, but I just really still had a fun time regardless. I like the boss arena that you fight in. It's very straightforward, very simple. This is just a 1v1 fight between you and Lady Maria. Also, the intro little cutscene where you go to like reach out and then she reaches out her hand and just like, you know, the dead should be left well alone, or whatever she says. You know, fantastic. It's just a really good thing. And then, you know, you finish the fight and then you get access to the very last area of the Hunter's Nightmare. So everything about Lady Maria is just fantastic. But I mean, everything. We're literally at like the top 1% of this list essentially. I love every single boss that's left with all of my heart. So this is a really tough ranking to do, but I feel content having her at number 6. Coming in at number 5 is the Undead Giant of the Lower Temerian Chalice Dungeon. Remember when I mentioned that there's a better version of this fight? I meant it. If I would have made this list before my most recent playthrough, this would be number 53. I'm not kidding. Maybe number 52. I don't know. The default maybe was pretty bad. But I hated this fight. But something clicked. In my most recent playthrough, I had the most exhilarating time fighting this boss just because it really took me learning the boss's windups and attacks, when you can go in, when you can't, you get punished if you make mistakes, and I just had so much fun, and this game just continues to surprise me with the ways that it can impress me and still make me enjoy things that I never would have enjoyed before. I cannot begin to explain just like the glow up that the Undead Giant has like gone through. All that's really different is the added chains on his back, but that is like enough of a difference maker that like you really need to just get his attack patterns down to be successful at this fight. And I find that process to be very exhilarating with this fight in particular, and that is what leads it this high on the list. At number 4 is Rom the Vacuous Spider, a boss that honestly I thought was going to be number 1 before my most recent playthrough. I really have always been a big Rom defender. Something about going through the waves of spiders while also trying to dodge Rom's attacks from the distance. You have to sort of keep your eyes peeled to spiders from different sides. You have to keep your eyes peeled on it doing its windup for like the long range, like throwing ice from the sky attacks. There's just so much that you have to keep track of that I just really love. And then the more that you get into the fight, the more attacks that Rom starts to do. And I've always just loved the boss arena and everything about it. I've just always been a big fan of this fight. So I know that Rom has its detractors, but I am definitely not one of them. This has always been one of my favorite bosses, and looking at the rest of the list, this actually is my very favorite base game Bloodborne boss. Coming in at number 3 is Ludwig, the Holy Blade, or the Accursed, or the whatever. You already know Ludwig is a fantastic boss. Everybody will agree. Has some fantastic music, a great boss arena. I love the transition cutscene. The first phase is just this like wild, out of control beast, and the second phase is this more composed, you know, frightening foe with this giant, you know, glowing sword. There's literally nothing to dislike about this fight. It is just utterly fantastic and perfect in every way, but so is everything else in the top 5, so this is just how I'm feeling in the moment. I really still feel challenged by this boss, and it's still always satisfying to win, and yeah, I just can't really think of any downsides. This fight is just incredible, but so are the two that are above it. At number 2 is the greatest Chalice Dungeon boss in the entire game, and that is the Watchdog of the Old Lords in the Defiled Chalice Dungeon. I feel like an absolute crazy person putting this here because this is a boss fight that has an instant one-shot no matter how much health you have. This just takes what the Undead Giant did and makes it even better because you really have to learn this boss's patterns. You need to know when it is safe to go in, when it is not safe to go in, the right angles that you can approach from, because if he starts winding up for that dash, you don't have that much time to get out of it. That will one-shot you. And something about the process of learning this boss's moves and having to execute it perfectly. You have to be perfect, essentially. And I really just find it so rewarding when you finally put it all together in the perfect run and win. And this game doesn't challenge me as much as it nearly used to, so it really means a lot to me that there are still some bosses that challenge me no matter how many times I fight them, and that is always going to be the Watchdog of the Old Lords, and that is why I have it this high. I just think it is an incredible fight, and I will go through the Chalice Dungeons just to fight it every single time if I have to. And coming in at number 1, my favorite boss of the game is the Orphan of Kos, What a hot take. A Bloodborne player likes the Orphan of Kos because it's challenging. It's the final boss of the Hunter's Nightmare. The arena is fantastic. You have to be super aggressive. This is one where you will get punished and it's hard to find windows to heal. It just puts everything together, all in one place. It's the perfect Bloodborne boss, and I always have such a fun time fighting it. This really is just the ultimate boss of Bloodborne, where you just need to put everything that you've learned all together and execute it for one final boss in the Hunter's Nightmare. It is just an incredible feeling to win. It's so much fun to fight, and I will go through the Hunter's Nightmare every single time just so I can fight the Orphan of Kos again. So there it is. We have the final complete list of every single Bloodborne boss ranked from my least favorite to my favorite. This was an incredible list to put through. This was an incredible journey to go through, and I really hope that you enjoyed. Somehow I managed to keep myself from rambling on for way too long, that the video is not like over an hour or something ridiculous. So we kept it at a pretty good pace, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If so, let me know. I would love to do something like this in the future. I don't think there's going to be any more Bloodborne rankings, but I would like to make rankings for other games, though who knows. If you do have any other rankings that you want me to do, maybe I'll consider it if there's enough likes and views and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, no promises, no guarantees. No matter what, I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, let me know, but I will see you all around. So till then, peace out.